Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor Hibbett. Next up on our team previews, we'll be looking at the Arkansas State Red Wolves. And here to join me on the channel today is Kara Ritchie. Kara, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for the invite. Appreciate it.
Well, before we get into the Red Wolves and the 2025 season outlook for Arkansas State, tell us what is your affiliation with Arkansas State and where our viewers can find your content.
Sure. So day to day, Monday through Friday, I host the Workday Red Zone, which is on from noon to 2. So just a 2 hour sports talk show that focuses really heavily on Arkansas State athletics. When we get to the college football season and the A-State season, I'll do a couple of different things there with Arkansas State football. I host the first hour of our pregame coverage on the EAB Red Wolf Sports Network there on Arkansas State football game days. And then I also host the post-game show called Wolf House on 1079 K-Fine, which is the flagship of A-State football and A-State athletics. So a few different tie-ins there to Arkansas State.
Well, that's awesome. And Arkansas State had a really good season this past year. I believe it was their highest win total since 2019. Is that correct?
I got to think back for a little bit, but that sounds just about right. It was an 8-5 season, and it was the first time A-State got to close the season in a few years, at least in terms of the Butch Jones era, on a high note, because you got to close out the year with that bowl win. So take some momentum into the offseason after a really good, really solid victory over Bowling Green.
Yeah, and Bowling Green was one of the most talented teams in the MAC this past year. They put up good fights against Penn State and Texas A&M in the non-conference. And so, yep, Arkansas State went into that game as about a touchdown underdog, but they actually proved to be the better team. They were ahead the entire game. I don't think Bowling Green ever had a lead in that contest.
No, and a couple of the scores that Bowling Green got, or at least one that I can think of off of my head, off the top of my head, was like a little bit of a trickeration
Yep.
involved. A-State was the better team. Now, I will tell you, Harold Fannin Jr. is no joke. That dude at
Yeah.
tight end was a load. He had a good day. He had a really good day against Arkansas State. And had to, I can't remember who ultimately drafted him in the NFL, but like that's going to be like one of the sleepers next year on my fantasy team, looking ahead to next year. But again, ultimately the better team prevailed that day, and it was just a really fun game to watch.
And Arkansas State has the opportunity to have another really fun team this year. They return their starting quarterback, Jalen Rayner. Rayner has really high upside, but I guess the area that he can improve the most would be limiting the mistakes. He had 10 interceptions last year, but if you just watch the tape on him, I mean, he's got high upside. He can scramble, make something happen when it's not there. So give us more insight on the Arkansas State quarterback room and what Jalen could provide this fall.
I think of Jalen Rayner as a pass first dual threat quarterback. He's got both skills, but where he can really do some damage is the long ball in the pass game. The deep pass there, he's got a really good touch on that, but he's just a an overall steady guy. We did see the interceptions creep up just a little bit last year. There were a couple of games where there were just a few poor decisions, but he can play better than that. He knows it. Everybody knows it. And I'm excited to see what kind of step forward he takes this year. He did mention around the end of spring camp that one of the things that he worked on and really wanted to focus on this offseason was just doing a better job with his pre-snap reads and evaluating what the defense was doing so that once it was go time and that ball was snapped, he knew what was going to be coming at him and could make the best decision there to give the A-State offense some success. He said he felt like he had taken a big step forward in that aspect. So I'm excited to see exactly how that plays out on the field. Elsewhere in the quarterback room, it's four guys all day, and it's really interesting because all of these guys are dual threat guys. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago. In fact, even I think back in like 2022, you primarily had, I guess more like pro style passers, guys that would want to sit in the pocket and need a little bit of time. Then in 23, that was Rayner's first year, but there were a different style of quarterbacks, and now it's kind of all the same mold, although all of them have different strengths. But behind Jalen Rayner, I think there's going to be still maybe continuing into the fall a battle there for backup between Southern Miss transfer Ethan Crawford as well as redshirt freshman Josh Flowers. And then you have a true freshman who arrived early on campus this year in Tyrell Lewis. Just went through his first spring, so we'll see what he can do as well. But I like the quarterback room because there's a lot of upside there with Jalen Rayner entering year 3. You just expect better play. You expect that continued growth, and there's already a great foundation there for him to build on.
Yeah, this is probably the best quarterback room Arkansas State's had since 2018, and his name escapes my mind, but they had a really good quarterback in 2018. He was one of the top quarterbacks in the Sun Belt. But it's probably the best QB room that they've had, at least in the last handful of years, when you talk about the depth that they have, and then obviously the top end talent with Jalen Raynor. How much do you think Raynor weighs in the production offensively? Like, if you were to take Raynor out, is the outlook completely different for this football team?
Yeah, I think so because I think this team could it's it's not that maybe Ethan Crawford couldn't step up. I think he has made more plays in his career in the run game as opposed to the pass game. And it's not that, Josh Flowers is not going to be any good because nothing could be further from the truth. He was a really highly decorated recruit. But this is Jalen Raynor's offense. Like there's not a debate. There was not a question going into camp who QB1 was going to be. He works really well now. It's been the same offensive coordinator as well in Keith Heckendorf for Jalen Raynor since he's been on campus. So he knows what he has to do to lead that system. He knows what he needs to do. And of course, he's got a really good rapport with some of his top playmakers, especially Corey Rucker there. So it's I don't want to say like the world would end for A-State's offense if you remove Jalen Raynor, but it would be a pretty significant hit. He's responsible for a lot of that offensive success.
And the quarterback I was trying to think of in 2018, Justice Hansen.
Yeah.
But with Rayner, but you mentioned Corey Rucker. So Raylan to Rucker this year, or Rayner to Rucker this year, I think could be one of the best G5 quarterback to wide receiver tandems in the entire country. But outside of Rucker, I do have some questions in the receiving room, and I want you to address these questions. What guys do you ultimately expect to step up and be the wide receiver two? And do you see anyone breaking through to the degree of what Corey Rucker is expected to be?
I think I really don't think anybody is going to catch Rucker in terms of targets and opportunities this season. One of the things about Rucker and Rayner this spring is there's an effortlessness about the way they are on the field. When they're out there playing together and Rayner finds Rucker, whether it's short, medium, long, whatever, there's just something about it that just looks so easy. It is just seamless for those two. That's going to be an incredible 1-2 punch. But yeah, you can't do it with one receiver. There's not a chance. And there's some really big shoes to fill and a lot of catches that departed last year via graduation. You've got to find somebody who jumps up there and establishes themselves in the slot. Just somebody that can really make things happen for you with their quickness. And there's a couple of guys that could potentially do that, particularly a transfer in Burris that came in that's going to be looked at to step up there. Maybe even Chauncey Cobb a little bit, who returns to A-State and has been on the roster for a couple of years now. Those guys have to step up. In terms of, some of the other guys there on the outside, I think Hunter Summers has the potential to have a really good year. He arrived as a transfer last year, and of course, he was behind some veteran senior leaders there in that offense. So he was used sparingly, but he did have some nice moments throughout the season. The catches are going to be there for Summers if he can jump up and seize that opportunity. There's going to have to be some other guys that step up as well there, and whether that is a guy like J.J. Harrell, who's transferring in from Mississippi State, or even one of the really, really young guys that arrived early in camp and got on the field. Somebody else is going to have to do that. And DeMarco Blanton as well is the name that I was looking for. That is a JUCO transfer that has landed on the roster. So again, I think I know Corey Rucker is going to do amazing things. I think Hunter Summers is going to do some really good things, but who else can step up and add to that group?
Rucker might be the best or maybe the second best receiver in the Sun Belt after Ted Hurst for Georgia State. And Rucker he averaged over 15 yards per reception last year, and he was targeted 125 times. Oftentimes, defenses knew he was going to get the football, and they still couldn't stop him. I mean, that's a sign of a dude, an alpha kind of guy that you want in your receiving core. So at least for Arkansas State, yes, they're going to be breaking in some new faces in the receiving room this year, but having a guy like Rucker, at least the defenses have to put their cornerback one on Rucker to shut him down, which opens up avenues for other guys to break through.
Absolutely. And then also, I think that one thing that's really key for this year as well with Rucker, he's also he just continues to progress there as a leader, showing these other guys in the room how it needs to be done. Because when you look at that room right now, he's a bonus senior. You know, he had a year there. He had a regular redshirt year, I believe, and then he also had an injury redshirt year. So he's played a lot of college football at this point in time. You also have the transfer in Burris that is a senior as well. But that's it. Those are the seniors. And you got a lot of young guys in that room that are freshmen and redshirt freshmen. So his leadership is going to be so important both on and off the field. And he's done a great job. He did a great job as one of those veterans last year, but he's got to step it up even another notch this year. And again, he's absolutely definitely got the capability to do it. Just a guy that is really hard to cover on the field and then off the field. He's going to be a really good example for that wide receiver room.
Rainer to Rucker. I think people are going to have to get used to saying that
Yeah.
this coming fall. That's it's going to be an electric combination there. Another position group on the offense that has some questions to answer. They have a lot of production that leaves a lot of guys who graduate is the offensive line. Now Noah Smith returns. Was he the right tackle last year? Is he going to be moving to left tackle? Do you or is he going
No,
to be
he
staying
played left tackle last year.
left
So
tackle?
there was at the very beginning of the season, they had just a couple of changes there at left tackle. So I can't remember who might have started game one because they had two or three different guys that played at left tackle probably within the first 2 to 3 games. But I would say, if I recall correctly, from probably about game three or game four on, it was Noah Smith there set at left tackle. And he was the only guy that I saw out there with the ones this spring taking reps at left tackle. So he's a left tackle.
Got you. And if you so at right tackle, is it going to be Riley McGehee?
So that is probably a position battle that is going to go into fall camp. Going into the spring, it was McKeelan Thomas who had had a lot of success there at right tackle for A State, and really easy to get excited about him. And then he portaled, so he is now at
Virginia,
Virginia.
right?
Yeah. So you got halfway through the spring, and then you had to change things up there. So there were a couple of guys who were primarily there at the end of camp. Alaric Watson was a guy who probably from Thomas's departure on to the end of camp, I would guess that Watson probably took the most snaps with the ones. I do think, Riley McGehee can also compete for that spot. They liked him a lot last year, and in fact, some of those snaps when Noah Smith was not out there at left tackle. It was Riley McGehee as a true freshman that was out there at that spot. So they like his potential. They're excited about what he can do. But I don't think that is a position battle that you can look at right now in May and say, hey, like this is going to be the guy coming up on August 30th. Right now, it looks like it's a two-man race, a Watson and McGehee.
And then at center, so Bayer was the starting center for the majority of the season last year. I think it was maybe only just the first game he missed, but he was, I think, a top 10, at least top 15, according to PFF, center in college football in 2023. He got injured. I think it was late 2023, early 2024, he got injured. And um, so Mason Myers took over for him for several snaps, so he has certainly some collegiate experience here. Is there a pretty high expectation for Myers stepping in at that center position?
I think so. You go back to last year. First off, I want to talk about Jacob Bayer for a quick second because his story is so remarkable. Bayer tore his ACL or had ACL surgery somewhere around April 1st of 2024. And
Wow.
then he was back week 2 of 2024 of the college football season. He missed a game. So you're looking at about like a 5 month and 1 week ACL recovery, which is just absolutely insane. And it wasn't a situation where he pushed it too much or he was over aggressive with it. He is now signed to the Bills, and they've gone through the medical. They've looked at the scans. Everything is clean. Everything is great. He recovered 100%. But that is just, again, that is something that is going to blow my mind for a really long time. 5 months back from an ACL. But you were correct in the fact that when he was not taking those snaps at centers, that 5 months that he was down, it was Mason Myers. I think when he was first kind of like pressed into service spring last year, just a little bit shaky, but he quickly adapted in the spring and then did a very solid job holding down the fort in game one, 2024. But those are some really big shoes to fill. You mentioned the PFF rankings and where Bayer was there. I think he finished number 2 in
Wow.
2023. He was way high up the leaderboard. And then 2024, it was kind of interesting because his first couple of early games, maybe the rankings weren't good. And then as Bayer worked his way back, it seems like every week he'd be up 10 more spots in the rankings on PFF. So some really big shoes to fill there for Myers. And they have all the faith in the world for him to be able to do so. Again, I really don't recall seeing anybody else out there for any extended amount of time with the ones this spring taking any other reps at center. And to the best of my knowledge, there are a couple of guys that have been, brought in the portal, but no centers there either. So that's Mason Myers' spot, and he'll have to make some pretty big gains from his true freshman season. But again, they like him. They're confident he can do that.
And sounds like he might have to stay healthy as well.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of made a depth chart for the spring, and then so many people were coming and going, and I would never put it out there publicly because it's not right. It's just flat out not right, and I really don't know what the depth looks like there at center. Walker Davis plays that position. I think he's entering year 3 on the team, so he would have an opportunity to step up there, but it's not exactly a position where there is experienced depth.
And so they brought in a transfer from Arkansas yesterday, offensive line. Is he going to be interior, like a guard?
I don't know. I really don't. And I actually read a little bit about him today. Zuri Madison is his name. He was a fairly high regarded guy out of high school. He's from Lexington and he was a 3-star out of high school. His final 3 schools were Arkansas, West Virginia, and Miami. And obviously he went to Arkansas. Tore his ACL last year, so never really competed for Arkansas there due to that and due to that recovery process. But for the life of me and all the things that I read, I cannot remember at all where he played on the line. So I apologize. I have no idea. I have no idea where he's going to end up.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, no, all good. Because you know what? During this time of year, when it comes to a lot, especially these G5 programs, a lot of the answers or a lot of the questions are going to have answers of, I don't know,
Yeah.
because there's just so many moving parts with the transfer portal, and then so the spring portal window closed in terms of putting your name in the portal, but we still have a lot of players out there who have their name in the portal but haven't committed yet. You can wait forever before you had to make your commitment. And so I can believe me, yeah, no issues here. I understand the variance of trying to cover teams. Even just covering a single team is a lot more difficult than it used to be.
I don't know how anybody honestly could do a preview at this point in time, or maybe not a preview. I mean, you can talk about the guys on the roster and where you think they're going to fit, but a ranking. How in the world could you do a ranking at this point in time? Because rosters have changed so wildly from 2024. And I haven't looked at these numbers all across college football, really just at the Sun Belt. And of course, there was a coaching change, but I saw this great note from Scott Watkins, who covers Southern Miss. And he mentioned that you compare and contrast the 24 and 25 rosters for the Golden Eagles. 84 players departed off the 2024 roster. And you look around the Sun Belt, and there's numerous schools that have 70 or more players that departed from the 2024 roster, looking now at the spring rosters out of 2025. So I think anybody who is hat tip to everybody out there doing football previews right now, we're all doing our best. And we've all got a lot more to learn once it gets to fall camp.
You guys all deserve a raise. But I'm actually going to be interviewing Scott later this month for Southern Miss, so I'll be looking forward to that interview as well. But yeah, going back real quick on the craziness and the wild, wild west of college football right now. Bill Connolly put out his returning production back in late February, I think it was, and the majority of the teams in the one teens and below in returning production were all G5 teams and Purdue from the Big Ten. So. Yeah, it's a crazy landscape of college football. So, speaking of that crazy landscape, you looked well, actually real quick, I don't want to skip over the running backs here. So, running backs for Arkansas State looks like this could be a strength of the offense this year.
Yeah, I like this room a lot. You start there with Jaquez Cross because this is going to be his 3rd year on the roster, and every year it seems like we've seen his contributions grow. He is kind of, there'll be multiple backs that A-State uses, and to think about Jaquez Cross, like he is that guy that has both quickness and speed. He's got that great shifty evasiveness to be able to wind his way through the trenches and find some gaps, and then if he gets a clearing, you ain't gonna catch him. He's been a guy that has done really well in the run game over the past few years, but then also is a huge weapon on special teams for A-State because he returns kicks as well, and he's phenomenal there. He'll have about three really good games of kick returns, and then nobody will kick to him for the rest of the season. So at the end of the year, there in terms of yardage, but a really great guy there. But again, everybody uses multiple backs. He's going to be that guy that is pretty much always out there on 1st and 10 and in situations like that. And then you would imagine that Kenyon Clay will be that short yardage and goal line back. And that's the role we saw Zach Wallace in last year. And of course, he departed via graduation and is now got an invite to Falcons minicamp. But Kenyon Clay is going to have to be that bruising back. It does sound like he absolutely has the ability to do that, despite playing in a not great Southern Miss offense last year. He still averaged over 4.5 yards per carry. And hearing Butch Jones talk about him was kind of interested because he did, of course, bring up the comparison to Zach Wallace, size wise, height and weight, they're built the same. But he also said he was faster than Zach Wallace. And Zach Wallace kind of had that sneaky speed, not a guy that you were going to put out there in a foot race. But again, if he got clear, he was really tough to bring down. So if you add a little extra speed there for Clay, that's something really exciting to think about. Devin Spencer is also a guy who returns. He got out there on the field a little bit as a true freshman. So, can he take a step forward? You certainly think so, being in his second year of Division One football. And then also Cedric Hawkins is a guy who was expected to play last year in 2024, got hurt, a pretty significant knee injury there in that Michigan game. He did not play in the spring, but he is still rehabbing, still is recovering. I'm not sure what his status will be this fall, but he had a really exciting freshman year. So he is another name to just keep in mind there in that running back room.
Well, earlier we talked about the wacky Wild West of college football and all the crazy transfers we have right now. And if you look at the defense, there's going to be a lot of transfers that likely see the field this year for the Red Wolves. I mean, if the depth chart that I'm currently looking at is correct, there could be up to 8 starters coming through the portal this year for the Arkansas State defense. Now, the one position group that I think has pretty good continuity is defensive end with Marcus Bradley, Brian Whitehead, Ethan Hassler, and I think Hassler's been with Arkansas State his entire college career, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, let's start up front. The pass rush looks like it could be a strength this year for the defense. What about the interior? And if you want to talk more about those defensive ends, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to talk more about the defensive ends because that's one of the few position groups on defense I can tell you even anything about. And when we get into this defensive preview, I just want to be very clear. Like I don't know. I don't think I could make a depth chart right now if my life depended on it because you go through and you look at the defense this fall and what is expected of this defense this fall. First, to flashback to 2024, the defense wasn't good. It just wasn't. There were some games where they played well, but you look across the board at the season, and nobody would say that was a strength for A-State. There were some areas, especially where A-State was gashed. It was not good against the run. Also wasn't great against the pass. It was just a unit that needs to be better. And so in the offseason, now everything is different. Of course, you had a ton of players that departed, most through graduation, which is what you want. But you did have a couple of guys portal as well. And then there's a new defensive coordinator and a new assistant coach pretty much in every single room there on the defensive side of the ball. So one part of the spring was just about like learning the scheme, which is not wildly different. It's a 4-2-5, so that's super common, but it was different than what we saw from A-State last year. And then just figuring out how some of those different pieces would work and what was going to be different. And it was a lot, and I still don't have a clear picture. I don't know if the coaches do either, because the since spring camp ended, there's been somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 portal players commit,
Wow.
and of those 14, based on where you look, you're looking at about 10 of those guys being on defense. So some areas, linebacker, defensive tackle, especially, like I just flat out don't know. We're going to do our best. Back to the original topic of the defensive line. You nailed it when you said the defensive ends are probably going to be a strength. Brian Whitehead is a guy who had a really good year last year, and it's really easy to get excited about potentially what he could do. Additionally, you've got Marcus Bradley coming back. Ethan Hassler did some really, really good things in 23 and during his career, but he was hurt last year. He didn't contribute at all to that A-State defense. So having him back at that position is going to be good. And then Demarcus Hendricks is a guy they brought in the portal from Division Two, Texas A&M Kingsville. But he did some really good things there. He had some really good numbers at a D2 school. So can he parlay that to Division One play? The interior of the defensive line, there were some guys that played well this spring, specifically Lucas Banks out of Mississippi Valley State originally, and then Simeon Mitchell, who is a transfer from McNeese. But then I think there's some guys that they added in the portal that are definitely going to play. You've got Christopher Bodie, who's played a lot there at Liberty and was rated really high from PFF compared to some of the defensive tackles that A-State lost. You've got Gavin Ransaw, who's a Coastal Carolina transfer. So you've got a guy who knows what it takes to win and be successful in the Sun Belt. He's coming in. Quincy Wright, a transfer from Sam Houston State, I think just announced that he was portaling into Jonesboro yesterday,
Yeah,
maybe.
he came from North Texas.
Yeah, yeah. So again, there's still a lot going on with that defensive line. But yeah, back to your original statement, the ends are going to be a strength, and that's great because if you can make the opposing quarterback uncomfortable, that puts everybody else on the defensive side of the ball in a better position.
And in regard to like the linebackers and the secondary, obviously there's a lot of production that leaves from last year. But as you mentioned, it's not like the defense was like insanely good last year. So could it potentially be addition by subtraction here?
I think I don't necessarily want to say that because there were some good players that were on these defenses last year. It just didn't click for whatever reason. Whether that was a coaching thing, whether that was a player thing, it didn't click a lot of games defensively. But I think it's going to be addition by addition. And I say that because you look at, especially at linebacker, and then we've already mentioned one in defensive end, but at linebacker and in the secondary they're going to be able to both position groups are going to add a guy that was a big contributor in 23 and then was not around in 24. For the linebackers, that's Shavonte Mackey, a dude who was a freshman All-American, had a phenomenal season, transferred to Memphis, got hurt there, so he didn't play at all last year. And now he's back. He's 100%. He is returning to Arkansas State. At safety, you've got James Reed III, a guy who played a little bit as a freshman and was a big contributor on special teams as well. He was really just starting to take that step last year as a sophomore. He had started the first 2 or 3 games of the season, was leading the team in reps on special teams, and it was an Achilles for James Reed III. So you get him back now in that secondary room. So you've got, again, addition by addition, some guys that you thought would help you out thought maybe could help you out, but weren't around for whatever reason, and now they're coming back. It is going to be different, again, different defensive schemes. So it's not like they're walking back into a situation where they know everything that's going to unfold, but those are going to be two big returners there for Arkansas State.
In regard to the ceiling for Arkansas State this fall, do you think that they are one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the Sun Belt? You think they have a real shot to play for the Sun Belt championship this fall?
I hope so, and I think so. I would have to look at some other teams' rosters because it's so wild right now, just it's wild to cover the team that I cover because again, you're looking at 70 plus players that have departed off the 2024 roster. You're looking at, I don't know how many new players were on the spring roster, but then now you've added 14 in the portal. You're about to add another 15 in terms of incoming freshmen. So even from spring, there's going to be almost 30 new guys to learn about that I don't know. I don't know anything about these guys. And then I'm having trouble keeping tabs on all of those guys for Arkansas State. So then you try and look around at the 13 other teams in the Sun Belt. I truly don't know. I do feel like just in terms of returning production, I feel like Georgia Southern returns a lot.
Yeah.
James Madison has always done a really good job of keeping up with their dudes, and they return their quarterback. Old Dominion returns their quarterback. You look at some of the teams in the West, and I'm not quite as sure what some of the statuses are there because South Alabama, their quarterback got taken late. They also lost some good skill guys. Texas State, I'm sure they went out and they did some huge things in the portal because GJ Kinney has been really good at getting some high profile transfers, period, since he's been there at Texas State. Troy lost some key guys. Louisiana, their quarterback graduated. ULM was right on the cusp last year of taking a big step and actually did a fairly decent job of keeping some of their good talent there. But I don't know if they're going to be able to take that next step and get over the hump and be a team that is vying for a bowl opportunity or not. So I know that wasn't a very clear answer. That was really just like a 2 minute long conversation of me saying, I don't know. I think if the offense does what the offense is capable of doing for A-State, they're going to have to come out strong out of the gate and give this defense just time to adjust and gel and all of that. If the offense performs the way they're capable of, yes, it's going to be a good season for Arkansas State, and A-State will be there at the end of the season, being one of those teams vying to make it to the Sun Belt Championship game.
I do not blame you one bit for not having a clear answer in regard to like the better teams because I mentioned it with the Bill Connolly returning production. If you look at the G5 right now, a lot of the top talent is getting poached, obviously, to the power
Yeah.
conferences, the Power Four, and specifically the SEC and the Big Ten, and a couple of the top heavy teams in the ACC. But it's creating like more parity in the G5. So it's like, okay, how much experience do you return? Do you have some position groups that have some quality depth where if one or two guys go down with an injury, can you withstand that? It's almost like what teams have the higher floors. It's not quite as much like we return everybody and we have a really, really, really high ceiling this year. Like if you look across the G5, there's only a few teams that return almost everybody from last year. And actually, one of the teams I'm surprised by is Boise State. That's kind of a crazy thought. But
One team I didn't mention quickly, and I don't know why, is I was kind of going through the list of Sun Belt West teams, and not that I can preview this team either, but Southern Miss is kind of a fascinating storyline because they go out and they get the guy who just won a Sun Belt Conference championship in Marshall's Charles Huff. And then of course he brings a lot of his talent south with him to Hattiesburg. So I don't know what that roster looks like, but I know they get to start with the Marshall quarterback going south to Hattiesburg. So they're a really interesting story this year, and there's going to be talent there at Southern Miss.
yeah, I'm very excited to watch the Sun Belt, especially the Sun Belt West. There's
Yeah.
like the best teams in the Sun Belt West. It's like they flip flop every single year. Like the team that was fourth best the previous year, now they're the best. And then yeah, there's a lot of variance in the West. In the East, the last few years has been James Madison, Georgia Southern, as you mentioned. They seem to be improving. Clay Helton probably has his best team at Georgia Southern this coming fall, so they'll be an interesting team. Well. Kara, really good job. And I know there's some variance here with some of these linebacker and secondary positions, but nonetheless, very good job covering the Red Wolves. We really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you for being on the channel. And before our time runs out here on the Zoom meeting, tell our viewers where again they can find your content.
Yeah, the easiest place to find me because I tweet out links and updates and things like that is going to be on Twitter. I spend too much time there, Twitter X, whatever, at Kara_Richie is the easy place to find me. And then online, if you do want to listen along, 953theticket.com is where we stream. So thanks again for the invite. Enjoyed the conversation and looking forward to fall.
Me too. I love college football, and I'll be interested to see how Arkansas State does this year. Again, really good
Absolutely.
job, Kara. And we enjoyed having you on the show, and we'll look to have you on again a year from now.
Okay. Thanks, Connor.
Yeah.